Tonight, we know a little bit more about how a man was able to shoot up cars and then be evaluated by police and then point a registered gun at an officer. Less than 2 weeks later, he was shot several times by police.
I think there were missed opportunities to use behavioral health crisis services that exist already in Baltimore City.
Now, WMAR 2 News' Eddie Kadam, who has been investigating this case, tells us what happened and what a mental health expert says should happen in the future.
What's going on now?
This body camera footage shows what led up to two officers shooting this man. Family members called 911 and told them he was in the basement having a mental health episode. For several minutes, three officers talked to the man who's been identified as Ricky Walker Jr. When Walker pulled a gun out of his pocket and aimed at an officer, two of the officers shot him.
It made clear to us how valuable having a mental health response along with the police response and EMS, how much that was needed in this particular incident.
Adrian Bridenstine with Behavioral Health System Baltimore oversees the behavioral health services in Baltimore City.
Case management or adequate housing, all of that is what prevents these crises from happening. And somewhere there was a breakdown in our systems.
She says a mental health clinician would have had a lot to offer in support of police and EMS. She added that a police presence can often escalate things, but she also acknowledged they are needed when a firearm and threats of violence are involved.
The man was in a basement, in a corner in a basement. I can imagine how he literally felt cornered, and that is not an ideal situation to have somebody in if they are in the middle of a crisis. So mental health clinicians know, in particular, if they're dealing with somebody who's got a history of violence or a history of having these crises, to not have any kind of therapeutic or de-escalation session in a closed environment like that.
Commissioner Harrison says every officer is trained on de-escalation crisis response, but not necessarily crisis intervention, saying that 1,500 officers, including the three involved in this case, have received behavioral health training from the BPD.
The consent decree requires that overall police reduce their interactions with people with disabilities, in particular people who may be having a mental health crisis.
Commissioner Harrison acknowledged that Walker was the same man who was arrested 11 days before the July 1st incident. That time, officers say Walker was naked around the corner from his home on Loch Raven Boulevard, shooting at cars. According to that police report, an officer was able to arrest Walker Jr. using pepper spray. In that police report, they say they tracked Walker Jr. back to his home, listed as 5809 Falkirk Drive. When asked if more could have been done to prevent the officer-involved shooting, like a red flag trigger to remove guns from the home, Harrison said this.
Since we had no fixed address or permanent residence for him, there was no place for us to go and search for other weapons, but he was given a mental evaluation that night.
Police recovered 8 firearms in total from the 2 incidents. 2 of them were registered to Walker. Harrison was pressed on whether more could have been done to get registered guns out of a man's hands that was arrested for shooting at cars just 11 days earlier during a mental health crisis.
We found out this time that he was only diagnosed after that incident.
In that time period, Walker Jr. was evaluated, released, and eventually shot after aiming a gun at police that he still legally owned.
Typically, what we would want to see upon discharge from a hospital is that this person is connected to ongoing care in the community. I don't know if that happened. I don't know if this individual has a connection to, a mental health therapist, for example.
Bridenstine says her organization is working closely with the Baltimore City Police Department to make changes to their trainings and dispatch policies. Commissioner Harrison says that the entire department is going to go through 40 hours of crisis intervention training coming up soon. Tonight, Walker is in the hospital. We're told he's in stable condition and he's facing charges of assault. Outside of the Baltimore City Police headquarters, Eddie Kadam, WMAR 2 News.
All right.